Thanks for being here. Here are your top stories this evening. For the second time in the past week, the people of Thunder Bay stood in solidarity with Wet'suwet'en First Nations in British Columbia. Supporters gathered at City Hall for a brief opening ceremony before marching up Memorial Avenue, ending at Marina Park for closing ceremonies. Unlike Tuesday's protest, which shut down multiple roads in the Port Arthur area, today's protest was a more safe and peaceful approach, walking along sidewalks with a police escort. Tanea Tomyatik, an organizer of the protest, wants people to know they are not against the city.
But this time we just want to show people that we're like your allies. We don't want to feel like we're ruining your day or anything, but we also just want to have respect for the Fort William First Nation land, respect with relationship with the police and just the community as a whole in Thunder Bay.
A group of high school youth will hold a rally in support of the Wet'suwet'en people on Wednesday of this week at 4:30 at City Hall. Tomyatik reminds people that these protests are out of love, peace, and support of the Wet'suwet'en people. The local screening of a controversial anti-abortion film caused a bit of a stir at Urban Abbey this evening. Unplanned is the name of the film, and it was being presented at the Urban Abbey by the local group, the Right to Life Association of Thunder Bay. Over 100 pro-choice protesters gathered outside the Abbey, while over 100 people gathered inside for the screening. The American movie has drawn impassioned reactions from groups on both sides of the issue. The film is based on a memoir from former Planned Parenthood director who left her position to be a leading figure in the pro-life movement. The situation remained civil, if not tense, Sunday evening as participants walked past protesters to attend the event. Joining thousands of others in over 100 communities across Canada, Saturday's rendition of the Coldest Night of the Year fundraiser in Thunder Bay had a slightly warmer feel. The fundraiser was close to their $70,000 goal shortly before beginning with money raised in pledges by over 300 participants who took part in either a 2, 5, or 10-kilometer walk in support of Grace Place and their Out of the Cold program. The Out of the Cold Emergency Overnight Shelter program allows those that are not able to access other shelter opportunities in town for one reason or another. Since the Out of the Cold homeless shelter opened 3 years ago, there have been 0 cold-related deaths in the city. Gary Maximchuk, event director, says despite the warmer days of late, the shelters are busier than ever.
The usage of the shelter has been down because of the warmer weather, but this year we've experienced higher than usual numbers. I would say that the amount of shelter, whether it be Shelter House, Grace Place, or the Salvation Army, definitely cannot meet the needs of the homeless population in Thunder Bay.
Maximchuk adds the program is working towards helping people become permanently out of homelessness. A part-time navigator assists those who use the shelter to find housing, which has been successful for several people this year, relieving the demand on the shelter. Over the last 5 years, the Trudeau government has pushed itself to end drinking water advisories in First Nation communities across Canada. This month, a 17-year boil water advisory ended for residents of Kijik Bay on the Lac Seul First Nation, with the opening of a new $10 million water treatment facility. Adam Riley reports.
Lac Seul First Nation has its own police force, event center, even its own radio station. But since February of 2003, the 350 residents who live in the Kijik Bay area have been forced to boil their water, but no more. Earlier this month, the community celebrated the opening of its brand new and improved water treatment facility, with many dignitaries, including Ogichida Francis Kavanagh, Kenora MP Eric Malillo, and Federal Indigenous Services Minister Mark Miller in attendance. Plant operator Blair Taverge says the push to build a new water treatment facility came from a need to meet the population growth that Lac Seul has seen in recent years.
It's happening a lot faster than people think. And it's happening a lot faster than the government's prepared to deal with. So if a community wants to grow exponentially and provide the level of service to their townsfolk that every other municipality in town has in Ontario, treated water and meeting that criteria is essential.
Through multiple departments, the federal government provided $8.3 million towards the project, which completed construction last year. Tverge says the former water treatment facility has been decommissioned, but the 2 water intake pipes that fed the plant are still in operation, but now feed the new plant. In addition to allowing the community to grow, Tverge says the new plant will also provide proper fire coverage, something desperately needed in many First Nation communities.
Before we built this facility, we couldn't open a hydrant for more than 10 minutes without running the whole town dry. Now we could probably put out a fire and still provide drinking water to the town.
But as this project comes to an end, a new one is on the horizon. Tverge says there are plans to expand the water distribution system and incorporating fire protection in another Lac Seul community, Whitefish Bay, but no date has been set for that project. Adam Riley, TBT News.
Confederation College honored over 400 students at their annual recognition reception this past week, thanks to help from donors from the Northwest. College students were recognized for their academic achievements and community involvement with 606 scholarships, awards, and bursaries totaling just under $302,000. In addition to being recognized, the event gave students the chance to thank donors for their continued support of the college. Gaurav Ganju, a recipient of 4 different bursaries, says the potential for financial support helps motivate him.
I don't have to worry about my textbook costs, and especially as an international student, we have limited working time off campus, so that gap gets filled with the financial support provided by the donors.
To be able to offset some of those financial pressures through these awards is fantastic for students. And it's great because our employers also are recognizing the hard work of our students. It's a way to for employers to attract students to specific programs by offering a bursary.
The students can learn here, get a good education, and hopefully remain in the region, work here, live here, and raise families here.
Adding this year's amount to those of the past 10 years, with the help of donors, Confederation College has been able to hand awards to over 3,400 students with a total of over $2 million. Westmount Public School took part in a nationwide event this past week to celebrate Canadian literature. February 19th marked the first annual I Read Canadian Day. Students from kindergarten to grade 8 at Westmount celebrated by having a whole school read aloud, 15 minutes of independent reading, and, as any good celebration should have, some cake. Westmount Principal Eric Frederiksen selected the novel Go Show the World by Wab Kinew for the school's read-along. And while the cake was a nice touch, Frederiksen knows there's more to this day than just dessert.
Well, the cake's a nice touch for sure, but we hope that it just continues to foster their love of reading, in particular today about Canadian authors and Canadian works, but also that it helps them to continue the passion and the understanding that they're gaining about the legacy of residential schools and the importance for us to be working towards reconciliation as a school community.
Frederiksen says they plan to continue this annual tradition next year, but one thing is for sure, Westmount Public School had their books and they read them too. It was all smiles this afternoon as over 1,200 athletes, coaches, and mission staff from across Canada began to arrive in Thunder Bay for the Special Olympics Canada Winter Games. The Games are a multi-sport national event for athletes with an intellectual disability. Avery McRae reports.
Athletes arrived in Thunder Bay to a hero's welcome from supporters, sponsors, and the game's passionate cheer squad for the Special Olympic Canada Winter Games. Events will take place from Tuesday through Saturday, with athletes from across the country competing in 8 official Special Olympic sports, including floor hockey, curling, and alpine skiing. Barry Stribe, chair of the organizing committee, says none of this would be possible without help from volunteers in the community.
And I tell you, when you have over 1,000 volunteers, stepping up to help out at an event like this, that's pretty cool. I mean, it exceeds anything that I've been involved with before. So the magnitude of this is pretty up there in terms of other events that go on in our community.
It's the fans that make this thing all possible. Without these guys, we wouldn't be here. And the volunteers are a huge part of this whole organization. Special Olympics Canada does a fantastic job doing this stuff, but the volunteers make it happen. And without them, we want to have this.
These games are qualifying events for athletes to become members of Team Canada attending the Special Olympic World Winter Games. Lloyd, who is playing in his 5th Special Olympics, says friendships are pushed aside once the games begin.
You can have friends all the time. Like all the pros have their friends. Once the game time is game time, your friendship goes away. You're there to do a job, and you're there to compete. Everybody's fighting for that one spot, and everybody has a chance. So that's what we're all here for. We're all fighting for that one spot to go further and on and represent our provinces.
Just excited that it's starting. As I said, we had some meetings today, and I said at the closing of my opening remarks, I said, you know, let the games begin already. We're so excited to get it started.
Avery McRae, TBT News.
Well, Mike, so we have Thunder Bay hosting a pretty big event for the Special Olympic athletes, and then, as we know, next year hosting the Scotties, which went down this weekend. How'd that turn out?
Yeah, it ended in Moose Jaw today. Just recently, we'll have the highlights of the championship draw after the break.